very good evening. You're watching Prime Time News on TV1. Bringing you the news this evening, I'm Sterling Machado.
And I'm Naveksha Gunasekara. Here are your headlines for tonight.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Ask for Eslon Polycon by name.
Trump moves to prevent global oil shock amid Middle East conflict, eases restrictions. Nations prepare for worsening oil crisis. Price hikes, stockpiling and work from home return. Reduce fuel use until tensions ease. CPC urges public.
වෙන රටවල් වගේම අපිත් සාමූහිකව මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට මුහුණ දෙන්න එකතු වෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට අනවශ්‍ය ගමන් බිමන් අඩු කරලා අත්‍යවශ්‍ය දෙයකට විතරක් තෙල් වියදම් කරලා.
Why raise fuel prices despite reserves? Opposition questions. Minister Nalinda responds.
අතරම මීට වඩා වැඩි කළ යුතු මිල වැඩි. නමුත් විශාල මිල වැඩි කිරීමක් එකවර අපේ ආර්ථිකය දරා ගන්න බැරි නිසා තමයි මේ ප්‍රමාණයට මේ වැඩි කිරීම සිදු වුනේ.
Navy seizes vessel transporting weapons and narcotics in southern seas. Former CID Director Prasad Ranasinghe arrested by bribery commission.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Ask for Eslon Polycon by name.
On to a top story tonight. Now, as the conflict escalates across the Middle East, questions are mounting over whether the regional conflict is now tipping the world toward a full-scale global energy crisis. This analysis examines how the rapidly shifting military and political landscape is reshaping international oil markets.
For the first time since 2022 or July 2022, the price of a barrel of crude oil exceeded the $100 mark yesterday. During the day, it peaked and reached the $119 mark. And when the conflicts in the Middle East first escalated, prices hovered around the $70 mark. Now, however, this morning when markets opened, we experienced a dip in prices. Brent crude prices in the UK market fell by 8.5%, with today's barrel price recorded at $92.50. In the United States, West Texas Intermediate, also known as the WTI, crude fell by nearly 9% this morning, with prices standing at $88.60 per barrel. Foreign media report that remarks made by US President Donald Trump stating that the Middle East war would end very soon contributed to the decline in prices.
We're also waiving certain oil-related sanctions to reduce prices. So we have sanctions on some countries. We're going to take those sanctions off till this straightens out. Then who knows, maybe we won't have to put them on. There'll be so much peace. But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. I hope it's not going to be needed, but if it's needed, we'll escort them right through. The relationship is extraordinary with Venezuela, smart country. We've taken out 100 million barrels of oil. It's right now in Houston being taken care of and made so beautiful. And you have to see this at work. They have it's brought to the refineries. It's being refined in Houston, which is made exactly for that product. And so far, but it's 100 million barrels of oil, and now they have another 100 million barrels coming. And it's like a partnership. We're getting along so well with them. It's great for Venezuela and it's great for the United States.
Alongside Trump's response, comments by French President Emmanuel Macron also helped push global oil prices down, according to international media. Macron announced that France and partner nations were working to launch a security operation to reopen the Strait of Hormuz for oil tanker movement. Accordingly, a naval fleet is expected to be deployed to the region. Iran has issued a stern warning declaring that it will not even let a liter of oil be exported from the region unless the United States and Israel halt its attacks. Now, citing an Iranian Revolutionary Guard spokesperson, Reuters reported that Iran will determine how the war ends. Responding to Iran's threat, President Trump warned that if oil transport through the Strait of Hormuz were obstructed, the US would retaliate with strikes 20 times stronger than the previous ones. He further warned that the United States would unleash deadly fire and fury on Iranian targets that would make recovery impossible. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has also intervened to help ease the war situation and address the oil crisis. Foreign media reports that Putin held a telephone conversation with President Trump and presented several proposals aimed at halting the conflict. Despite the fall in global oil prices, production cuts imposed by Iraq, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia continue to influence the market. The International Energy Agency has proposed releasing 300 million emergency barrels into the market to stabilize volatility and reduce global demand pressures. The proposal is expected to move forward following a decision taken during the G7 finance ministers meeting. G7 finance ministers expect the move to help control global oil prices and prevent potential fuel shortages. Against this backdrop, foreign media reports of a possible attack that could be carried out on Karg Island. Now, this island is considered the backbone of the Iranian oil industry and where almost 90% of its oil is exported from. Economic analysts warn that if such an attack is carried out by the United States and Israel, global oil markets could face severe turmoil. Amid the supply disruptions caused by the Middle East war, reports indicate that a massive stockpile of crude oil belonging to Iran, Russia and Venezuela is anchored in the Chinese Sea. According to Bloomberg, ships carrying close to 40 million barrels of crude are currently stationed near China, more than 3/4 of which is Iranian oil. This represents a 17% increase compared to levels recorded before the outbreak of the Middle East conflict. Economists note that China's strategy of purchasing and stockpiling cheap oil throughout the past year has now proven successful. India, the world's third largest oil importer, is facing severe difficulties during this period. 60% of India's oil supply comes from the Middle East. With the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, those supply routes have been disrupted. Although the United States has granted India a 1-month waiver to purchase Russian oil, foreign reports say India now faces intense competition from China. Analysts point out that despite approval to buy Russian oil, the volumes available will not be enough to meet India's daily requirement of 2.6 million barrels. With Chinese buyers also placing high demand on Russian supplies, India could struggle to secure sufficient quantities. As the global fuel crisis deepens, several countries have introduced emergency measures, including significant fuel price hikes. Pakistan raised fuel prices by 20% on the 7th March. Authorities have also temporarily removed 60% of government vehicles from use and reduced fuel quotas for remaining vehicles by 50%. Foreign media report that employees in both public and private sectors have been instructed to work from home except in essential services. Bangladesh has announced that petrol and diesel prices will soon increase by 4 to 5 taka, approximately 15 rupees. All state and private universities in Bangladesh were closed from yesterday as part of emergency measures to conserve power and fuel. The country has also limited petrol allocation for motorcycles to just 2 litres per visit. In South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung imposed fuel price caps for the first time in nearly 30 years. Japan saw its oil prices rise by more than 25% yesterday. Foreign media reported that Japan's oil prices have now reached their highest levels since mid-2022. Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos ordered a temporary 4-day work week to conserve energy and reduce fuel consumption. As part of measures to cope with the impact of the Middle East war, the acting Prime Minister has also instructed government institutions and state-owned enterprises to allow employees to work from home and suspend overseas travel. The country's Ministry of Energy has proposed raising air conditioning temperatures in government and private offices to 26 to 27 degrees Celsius, encouraging employees to wear short-sleeved shirts without ties at non-formal events, reduce use of unnecessary electrical appliances, limit use of lifts and photocopiers, and promote virtual meetings. India has increased domestic cooking gas prices by 60 rupees but has not raised fuel prices. India says its reserves are sufficient and fuel prices will not need to be increased unless crude oil surpasses $130 per barrel.
As countries across the world implement various measures to manage the global petroleum pressure, what exactly is happening in Sri Lanka? Now, from midnight yesterday, fuel prices were increased, and today the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has urged the public to minimize fuel consumption as much as possible until the ongoing war situation eases.
The price of octane 92 petrol has been increased by 24 rupees, bringing the new price to 317 rupees per litre. Octane 95 petrol has been increased by 25 rupees with a new price of 365 rupees per litre. Auto diesel has gone up by 22 rupees, making the new price 303 rupees per litre. Lanka super diesel has been increased by 24 rupees with the new price at 353 rupees per litre. The price of kerosene has risen by 13 rupees, now costing 195 rupees per litre.
I clearly told the public during the past several days not to panic and that we had an adequate supply of fuel. But at the same time, I also made it very clear that our storage capacity is limited. The amount we can stock is limited. Our assurances were based on existing stocks plus the confirmed arrivals scheduled for this month. From the 1st to the 27th, no one had their time or ability to predict that global fuel prices would rise by nearly 100%. What we have now is the fuel from those arriving vessels. Due to the public panic between the 1st and the 9th, consumption shot up. 59,200 metric tons of diesel and 47,500 metric tons of 92-octane petrol were used. This means the fuel that was supposed to last until mid this month is now in the hands of the public. The cheapest stocks we purchased are already finished. We received a vessel on the 1st and another on the 7th. This is the fuel we are currently distributing. So naturally, people may ask, if shipments were confirmed, why were prices increased? We only confirm the premium. When a shipment unloads, we must pay according to the 5-day global price average. In the past 9 to 10 days, we have discharged almost 1.5 vessels of diesel and roughly the same amount of petrol. These payments are in dollars and the economic impact will follow.
Will prices rise again?
Iran and Israel have begun attacking oil storage sites and refineries. Like other nations, we too must collectively face this situation. People should reduce unnecessary travel and use fuel only for essential needs. We are telling the public clearly, this is not a normal situation. It is extremely serious. Until conditions stabilize, we must all unite and minimize fuel consumption as much as possible.
Why was the price increased by so much?
පහුගිය කාලේ මිනිස්සු කලබල වෙලා තෙල් පෝලිං වල ඉඳගෙන තෙල් ටික එකතු කරේ නැත්නම් මේ මිල සංශෝධන තව දවස් කිහිපයක්
අනිවාර්යෙන් සමහරලාට මේ මාසේ අන්තිම දක්වා
If people had not panicked and lined up at fuel stations to stockpile, this price revision could have been delayed by several more days. For example, a vessel of aviation fuel arrived recently. On the 27th, the price was 93.57. By the 4th, it had risen to 231. When a shipment arrives during a spike like this, the Petroleum Corporation must pay more than $30 million at once. Calculate that against a price increase of 308 and you'll understand the scale. You know that even now fuel prices have not gone above the levels that existed when this government took office. What we can say for certain is this. This war will end only when oil prices decide it. Based on the global shortage of supply, this conflict will not end anywhere we can yet see.
Many countries around the world are preparing for an oil crisis against the backdrop of the ongoing and unresolved conflicts in the Middle East. Now, Sri Lanka has also taken preliminary steps in response by increasing fuel prices and requesting the public to limit consumption. The opposition is now levelling several allegations regarding these measures. What are they saying?
This is how Sri Lanka's opposition reacted to the government's recent decisions on petroleum.
When the government said there were stocks of petrol and diesel sufficient for 26 and 32 days, raising diesel prices by 22 rupees and petrol prices last night is nothing but robbery from the people. They've increased the price of old stock. So this is outright theft. With this price hike, everything will inevitably increase. From bakery items to kottu, from books to basic goods, this shows the government has not even the slightest concern for the people. This government came to power promising to increase fuel prices when global prices went down. You don't need a government for that. Even a businessman from PETA could do it. These weren't our words. These were said back then by the government itself. So now, using foreign conditions as an excuse doesn't work. Not a single drop of fuel has been brought to Sri Lanka at these increased global prices.
What does the Sri Lanka Poduchana Peramuna say?
Within 24 to 48 hours of raising prices here, global fuel prices actually fell. So naturally, we have questions. If the government says there are fuel stocks for 45 days, why the sudden price increase? This looks like another attempt to burden the public, just like the coal scam, to compensate for losses by squeezing the people.
Fishing in troubled waters.
Do you remember the Supreme Court judgment in November 2023 that held that several high-profile politicians, including the President and the Finance Minister, were responsible for bankrupting Sri Lanka? Yes, this judgment detailed exactly how these individuals worked to bankrupt Sri Lanka, how they did not take the right decisions at the right time, and how all of that culminated in Sri Lanka becoming bankrupt. In April 2022, Sri Lanka announced that they can no longer service their foreign debts because our foreign reserves were depleted, and this resulted in severe consequences for the entire country that lasted several years, and people in Sri Lanka continue to suffer for this announcement, and the acts, of course, more fully explained in the judgment of the Supreme Court. And we see today that members of those same political camps affiliated with those who were found responsible of bankrupting Sri Lanka, their family members, close associates who are in politics, are trying to fish in troubled waters. And this is not the first time around that they've tried this trick. But as the general public, it's important that we understand what is going on and we understand what is best for Sri Lanka, because at the end of the day, when the general public decides, when the general public voices their opinion, if it is in the best interest of the country, it is in the best interest of all of us. So let's take a look at what really happened in this Supreme Court judgment, and especially since there is a fuel crisis across the world. In Sri Lanka, the Strait of Hormuz has been closed down. Iran and the United States and Israel continue to wage war against each other, and fuel prices continue to rise at an alarming rate. Let's take a look at how fuel prices, or the maintaining of fuel prices at a certain level, resulted in Sri Lanka becoming bankrupt, how it contributed to Sri Lanka becoming bankrupt, and how not taking the right decisions at the right time resulted in Sri Lanka's bankruptcy. Fuel prices in Sri Lanka have always been a subject that political camps use to get some political mileage, to get some political edge over their opponents, without bona fide presenting the true facts of the matter to the general public. What happened when Sri Lanka became bankrupt and how fuel prices contributed to that has also been discussed in the judgment of the Supreme Court that held several high-ranking politicians in Sri Lanka, people who held high office, guilty of bankrupting Sri Lanka as a whole. Now, in 2019, the government maintained fuel prices as far as a litre of 92-octane petrol is concerned at a rate between 137 rupees and 149 rupees. Back in 2019, diesel prices were somewhere between 104 rupees and 111 rupees. Now, subsequent to 2019, there were global crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic. Supply chains were disrupted. Fuel prices, of course, in the global market rose rapidly. And Sri Lanka, however, the government at the time did not take the right decision at the right time and maintained prices in that range. Now, what did this finally result in? By July 2022, the price of 1 litre of 92-octane petrol skyrocketed to 470 rupees. The price of 1 litre of diesel skyrocketed to 460 rupees. Now, this is the result of artificially holding prices low when the price of fuel in the global markets continued to rise. Of course, the general public now having suffered from not taking the right decision at the right time from political players in Sri Lanka, including the president, the prime minister, the finance minister, and the entire cabinet ministers as a whole, people having suffered from those leaders of our past not taking the right decisions at the right time, today understand the reality of the situation. Because it is as a result of that Sri Lanka became bankrupt, and we continue to suffer the dire consequences that we are suffering today. If fuel is purchased at a lower price and sold at a higher price, well, that's a profit to the government. If fuel is purchased at a higher price and sold at a lower price, that is a loss to the government being the people. Because at the end of the day, it is our taxpayer money that is funding the government. And like it or not, even if you want fuel at a lower rate, and for the government to purchase it at a higher rate and provide it to you at a lower rate, it will be the general public of Sri Lanka, it will be the taxpayers of Sri Lanka who will be footing that bill in the end. The Supreme Court judgment speaks in detail about how not taking the right decisions at the right time by those in power at the time resulted in Sri Lanka becoming bankrupt. Today, we know that there is a crisis in the Middle East. We know that the United States, Israel are at war with Iran. We know that the oil production in the Middle East has dropped significantly. We know that the supply chain of oil has been severely affected due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the ongoing war in the Middle East. And we need to prepare for it as a nation. Not only Sri Lanka, we see countries across the globe preparing for this impending crisis. They are making the right decisions now so they don't have to suffer the consequences of not making the right decisions now in the future. In Thailand, the government introduced a work-from-home concept in the hope of conserving fuel. In the Philippines, they have introduced a 4-day work week to conserve fuel in the country. In Bangladesh, the government has announced several measures, including limiting the number of days that university students have to travel to their universities in the hope of conserving fuel. These countries are taking the right decisions today so that they don't have to suffer tomorrow. The United States, that is a country that has so much of oil in their storage terminals, they have oil reserves. Even in the United States, several states have increased their fuel prices with the rise in global fuel prices and, of course, with the conflict in the Middle East further escalating. But besides all that, despite all of that, and despite knowing the fact of the matter, the truth of the situation, there are those in Sri Lanka who will continue to fish in troubled waters. As the general public, what is our duty in such a situation? Although these people who fish in troubled waters see this as just another opportunity to get some political mileage, to get some political edge, or to further their political interest and ensure that the people that they support rise to power, these are very real issues for the general public of Sri Lanka. Fuel prices are a very real issue for the general public of Sri Lanka. And as was highlighted in the Supreme Court judgment, where the president, the finance minister, and several other top officials in Sri Lanka were found guilty of bankrupting Sri Lanka, fuel prices, or the government's policy on fuel prices, just for the purpose of gaining some political edge, had resulted in Sri Lanka's economic crisis, was one of the key reasons in Sri Lanka's economic crisis. And why that was a key reason in Sri Lanka's economic crisis, or leading Sri Lanka to bankruptcy, is the fact that right decisions were not taken at the right time. So as the general public, we need to understand this, we need to appreciate this fact, and we need to identify those who are fishing in troubled waters, because there is an age-old saying that goes like this: fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me.
Responding to a rising criticism over the recent fuel price increase, the cabinet spokesman addressed the media today.
අතරම මීට වඩා වැඩි කළ යුතු මිල වැඩි. නමුත් විශාල මිල වැඩි කිරීමක් එකවර අපේ ආර්ථිකය දරා ගන්න බැරි නිසා තමයි මේ ප්‍රමාණයට මේ වැඩි කිරීම සිදු.
In reality, the price should have been raised even more, but our economy cannot withstand a sudden drastic increase. That is why the hike was limited to this level. At the same time, we expect the public to help limit fuel consumption during this period. The Ministry of Finance is currently reviewing the global situation, especially the rise in refined and crude oil prices, to explore whether short-term relief can be provided. However, any such measures must be taken in a way that places minimal pressure on the economy. That is why the price adjustment and the need to reduce consumption go hand in hand. We do not know if global oil prices, even though they dropped to 94 to 95 today, will rise above 100 again in the coming days. Many forecasts suggest that possibility. Taking all these factors into account, the price revision was implemented. Many countries with far larger oil reserves have raised prices significantly, with increases of 21% in Pakistan, 19% in Vietnam, 13% in the United States, 12% in New Zealand, and 10% in Ukraine. These countries have storage and reserves far larger than us. Some even have their own oil. Yet, due to developments in the Middle East and the volatility in global oil prices, they too are adjusting. I wish to highlight local consumption figures. Lanka auto diesel on the 1st of March, 3,939 kiloliters. On the 2nd, 10,321 kiloliters. On the 3rd, 9,845 kiloliters. On the 4th, 9,962 kiloliters. On the 5th, 8,511 kiloliters. On the 6th, 8,442 kiloliters. On the 7th, 9,816 kiloliters. Petrol on the 1st of March, 5,461 kiloliters. On the 2nd, 11,701 kiloliters. On the 3rd, 10,292 kiloliters. On the 4th of March, 9,111 kiloliters. On the 5th, 7,398 kiloliters. On the 6th, 6,253 kiloliters. And on the 7th, 7,590 kiloliters. These numbers clearly show a significant spike in consumption. When global prices rise and local usage rises, the impact on our dollar reserves becomes severe. The price increase was necessary to manage both.
තෙල් මිල වැඩි වෙලා අපේ පරිවර්තන වෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ එක පැත්තකින් අපේ ඩොලර් සංචිතයට ලොකු බලපෑමක් වෙනවා. මේ සියල්ල කළමනාකරණය කර ගැනීම සඳහා තමයි මේ තෙල් මිල වැඩි වීම සිදු කරේ.
සංචිත තියෙද්දි තෙල් මිල වැඩි කරපු එක ගැනයි අපි ප්‍රශ්න කරන්නේ නැතුව වෙන දෙයක්.
තෙල් වල අඛණ්ඩ සැපෙම වැදගත්. ඒ නිසා ආර්ථික යම් කොටසක් වහගෙන තෙල් පරිභෝජනය අඩු කිරීම නෙවෙයි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. මේ තිබෙන තෙල් ටික ඔක්කොම ඉවර කළා මිල වැඩි කරන එක නෙවෙයි. අපි මේ මොහොතේ පවතින තත්ත්වයක් අනාගතයත් පිළිබඳව සලකා බලලා සහ පරිභෝජනය අඩු කරගන්න තත්ත්වෙ මෙතන උමනාවකුත් පවතිනවා. QR එකෙන් තෙල් පරිභෝජනය අඩු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. QR එක හැදුවේ තේන ටික බෙදා හැරීමේ ක්‍රමයක් හැටියට මිසක් පරිභෝජනය අඩු කරගන්න නෙමෙයි. ඔබට මතක ඇති ඒක. ඒකෙන් උනේ තෙල් පෝලිං නැති වුණා. පෝලිං වලින් තෙල් ගහන එක නැති වුණා පමණයි. පරිභෝජනයේ සංඛ්‍යා ලේඛන වලින් ඒ මොහොතේ පැවති තෙල් වල අඩුවක් සිදු වුණේ නැහැ.
මට දැන් මේ වෙලාවේ සාධකයක් දෙන්න පුළුවන්ද? දැන් මිල වැඩි කිරීමක් කරපු නිසා කල් දියාම නැවත වැඩි වුණොත් වැඩි කරන්නේ නැද්ද රජේ?
ඔබ මට කිව්වොත් හෙට අනිද්දාට කීයද බොරතෙල් මිල හෝ පිරිපහදු මිල වැඩි වෙන්නේ කියලා මට මේවා කියන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් කියන්න බෑ.
සාපේක්ෂව නැවතත් වැඩි කරනවද?
මට එහෙම කියන්න බෑ. ඔබට කියන්න පුළුවන්ද ඩොලර් 72කට තිබුණු බොරතෙල් එක 105ට යන්නේ කවද්ද කියලා? ජනතාවට අධික ලෙස බර පැටවෙන ආකාරයට තෙල් මිල ඉහළ යාමක් සිදු වෙනවා නම් අපි ඒකට යම් මැදිහත් වීමක් කරන්න සූදානම්.
Fishing in troubled waters.
Iran says it is prepared for a long war with the United States and Israel. Iran declared the confrontation an existential threat and ruled out any possibility of renewed diplomacy, even as US President Donald Trump insisted Washington has already won in many ways. Newsfirst's Vinuji Senaviratna tells us more.
According to Kamal Karazi, the foreign policy advisor to Iran's supreme leader, Iran is ready for a long war if the United States and Israel choose that path. Now, in an interview with CNN, he said the situation posed an existential threat to the Islamic Republic and that Iran would stay with full might as it is doing now.
So your side is ready for a long war if the United States and Israel choose that. Do you consider this an existential threat to the Islamic Republic?
It is an existential threat to the Islamic Republic, and therefore we have to stay with full might, as we are doing now.
Is your side seeking, or will you seek, a ceasefire with the United States at this point in time, and with Israel?
I don't see any room for diplomacy anymore, because Donald Trump has been deceiving others and not keeping with his promises. And we experienced it in 2 times of negotiations, that while we were engaged in negotiation, they struck us.
Now, shifting your attention towards the United States, President Donald Trump said the United States had already won in many ways. But he emphasized that it hasn't won enough, calling for greater determination to achieve what he described as an ultimate victory that would end a danger that had persisted for 47 years.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory that will end this long-running danger once and for all. 47 years, it should have been done a long time ago. The world would have been a different place had some president had the courage to go and do it.
Meanwhile, Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, has dismissed the possibility of renewed negotiations with the United States, saying Iran's leadership had no intention of reopening talks.
And since his selection, has he or anyone in your leadership had any contact with U.S. officials? Is that something that he is open to talk about negotiations or a ceasefire?
Well, first of all, it's too soon, for him to make any comment. We are all waiting for his speeches and comments, which would come later on. But I don't think the question of talking with Americans or negotiation with Americans once again would be on the table, because we have a very bitter experience of talking with Americans. We negotiated with them last year in last June, and they attacked us in the middle of negotiations. And again this year, they tried to convince us that this time is different. They promised us that they don't have any intention to attack us, and they wanted to resolve Iran's nuclear question peacefully, and to find a negotiated solution, and we finally accepted. But again, after 3 rounds of negotiation, and after the American team in the negotiation said itself that we made a big progress, still they decided to attack us. So I don't think, talking with Americans anymore would be, on our agenda anymore.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said during a press conference in Washington, D.C. that today would be, quote-unquote, yet again the most intense day of strikes, and claimed Iran was badly losing. Hegseth also claimed the past 24 hours had seen the lowest rate of missiles fired from Iran. Iran's IRGC rejects U.S. claims that its missile program has been destroyed, says it is deploying projectiles in greater numbers and with warheads weighing more than 1 ton. The Israeli army has repeated its forced evacuation threat for the entire southern part of Lebanon's capital, known collectively as Dahieh and home to hundreds of thousands. It warned of imminent attacks on the neighborhoods of Lailaki, Hadat, Burj al-Barajne, Tahwitat al-Ghadir and Chia, among others. Authorities in Abu Dhabi are responding to a fire caused by drone attacks at a facility in the Ruwais industrial complex. No injuries have been reported so far. Turkey SFM Hakan Fidan has held a phone call with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi, in which he stressed that the violation of Turkish airspace is unacceptable. Fidan warned Araghchi that Turkey would take the necessary measures to address the violations, a day after the Turkish Ministry of National Defense said NATO air defenses intercepted a ballistic missile.
අයිවන් සතුටින් ඉන්නේ වයරින් කරලා වයරින් කිරුවේ එස්ලොන් පොලිකොන් යොදලා.
For your safety and the protection of the wires used in networking, electricity and AC wiring, S-Lawn Polygon cable trunking, suitable for white walls, prevent spread of fire, double lock technology. Ask for S-Lawn Polygon by name.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Vijay Herat outlined a series of structural reforms aimed at transforming the island nation into a transparent multi-port logistics hub. He was speaking to Sanjoy Joshi, chairman of the Observer Research Foundation.
What fundamental shifts in economic policy, if I were to ask you, is Colombo pursuing to boost investor confidence? What are the structural reforms in taxation, export diversification, governance, which you are really looking at? Fundamentally, what do you see as the basic building blocks for long-term stability, so something like the past does not recur?
Now there is no corruption and bribes and malpractices. It is a great achievement. Because of the zero tolerance corruption situation, investors can invest free and fairly. Earlier, there was no such a situation. And we are introducing new investment protection bill also. The bill already has submitted to the relevant authorities. And we have introduced a single window system to all investors. And as far as concerns the tariff, there is a transparency, a simple tariff system we have introduced. Therefore, the investors and local and foreign investors can invest easily because of that changes. We obtained highest revenue from the custom, excise and the inland revenue department also because of zero tolerance corruption. Therefore, all investors can easily open their new investments in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is actually it is an international trading hub, and our location is very important. The west and east, we are located our country near to the very near to the west and eastern shipping lane. Therefore, situation of Sri Lanka is also very familiar to world traders, world investors. According to our new arrangements regarding, you mentioned about the tariff system and zero tolerance bribes and corruption situation, and there were no any ethnic or religious violence situation in Sri Lanka. The peace and calm situation is there. Therefore, new investors can easily invest in Sri Lanka. That is the present situation of our country.
So, very important point you raised, Sri Lanka's geographical location, Sri Lanka as a hub in the Indian Ocean, to develop this into a logistics hub, a hub for digital services, manufacturing. There are lots of possibilities which can be there. So, you see a lot of comparative advantages that can reduce dependence on traditional sectors. So which are the areas, which are the specific areas which you're focusing on to capitalize on the geographical location of Sri Lanka to give this big boost forward?
Location of Sri Lanka is very important to logistic hub because so many international logistic traders want such type of port facilities. We have such ports. Colombo port is there and Hambantota port is there, and the Trincomalee port is very important. It's a natural port. There are the main three ports are there. The location of those three ports very convenient to international logistics.
News First with the people.
අයිවන් සතුටින් ඉන්නේ වයරින් කරලා වයරින් කිරුවේ ඉස්ලොන් පොලිකොන් යොදලා.
For your safety and the protection of the wires used in networking, electricity and AC wiring, S-Lawn Polygon cable trunking, suitable for white walls, prevent spread of fire, double lock technology. Ask for S-Lawn Polygon by name.
A multi-day fishing trawler has been taken into Navy custody in the deep seas south of Sri Lanka on suspicion of transporting narcotics and weapons.
Navy media spokesperson Commander Buddhika Sampath stated that during a special naval operation, the multi-day fishing trawler was taken into custody while transporting several sacks suspected to contain narcotics and a consignment of weapons. He further mentioned that the vessel is currently being escorted to the shore for further investigations and legal proceedings.
Former DIG in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department, Prasad Ranasinghe, who was arrested by the Bribery Commission, has been released on bail. This is after he was produced before the Colombo Half-Staff Magistrates Court this evening.
Reports say that on the night of 14th of December 2022, a rock carving known as the Sandagala, weighing approximately 1,000 kilograms, was stolen from the palace grounds of King Veeraparakrama Narendra Singha, who reigned from 1707 to 1739 in Kundasale. It was reportedly transported away under the protection of a defender. Former DIG Prasad Ranasinghe was arrested on charges of exerting undue influence over the investigations into this antiquity theft and aiding certain suspects involved in the crime to evade arrest.
Experts in neurostimulation gathered for a guest lecture on TMS technology, offering insights into its scientific principles, therapeutic applications and the potential future impact on mental health treatment in Jaffna today.
A guest lecture on transcranial magnetic stimulation was recently held, introducing participants to the principles, clinical applications and future potential of this neurostimulation technique in mental health and beyond. The session also served as a prelude to the establishment of TMS services in Jaffna, a collaborative initiative between the Teaching Hospital of Jaffna and the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Jaffna. Attendees engaged in discussions on how TMS could transform psychiatric and neurological care in the region.
It's our privilege to donate 2 TMS machines, one to Colombo, one to Jaffna. TMS is a safe, non-invasive treatment for both depression, anxiety and trauma. It's highly effective, it's very well established, it's extremely safe, it's provided as on an outpatient setting, and the treatment course can be anywhere between 2 to 7 weeks. And given that people in Sri Lanka have concerns about psychiatric illness and psychiatric medications, having a safe, non-invasive, medication-free treatment for depression can make a big difference in a country where depression is such a big issue. And we've got this TMS machine, we've got the coverage and the maintenance for it for the next 5 years.
This initiative represents an important step toward expanding advanced mental health services in northern Sri Lanka.
The capping ceremony for this year, organized by the Australian College of Business and Technology, took place in Colombo today.
The capping ceremony is a significant milestone in the academic journey of nursing students that symbolizes their formal entry into the noble profession of nursing. The ceremony, a time-honored tradition in the nursing profession, serves as the formal transition for students from theoretical academic study to hands-on clinical practice. The event was attended by distinguished guests from the healthcare and education sectors, faculty members, parents and students.
And with that, we wrap up Primetime News for tonight.
Thank you for watching. Good night.